Hello, I'm Pep, and today we're going to weave the tale of Tyru Synoske and how he single-handedly defeated the were-vulture. The adventure starts off on a quest to find the root of some uprising of evil in the countryside. Some sort of a dark master has been rising minions to their bidding. They aren't exactly sure what kind of a master it is, but they're going to try to find out. They root out the approximate location of the master to a cave, and they begin to explore the cave, coming across multiple obstacles we need not discuss. Needless to say, even though the fighter, rogue, and monk, Tyru themselves, were feeling fairly refreshed by the time they reached the boss encounter, the wizard was down a few spells. They were still relatively low level, and they'd expended a good bit in order to make it through. As a DM, this had me worried, for unknown to them, the boss was a were-vulture. This was D&D 3.5 specifically, and in that particular version, werewolves had a damage reduction of 15 unless you had a silvered weapon. Now, of course, most of them didn't. However, magic would bypass this damage reduction, but as I said, the wizard didn't have much left. Anyway, when they finally encountered the were-vulture, they found them in a large cathedral that had been carved into this section of the mountain. Perhaps an ancient ruin of marble that had once been here, but has long since been covered over by rock and stone. They quickly noticed that this were-vulture also had some sort of a dark scepter, and she was not particularly brave. So as the party entered into this cavern, she quickly flew up beside one of the pillars, about 30 feet into the air. The wizard fired off their final spell, a magic missile, dealing a little bit of damage, and the fighter, lacking a ranged weapon, and even if they had one, it wouldn't be able to deal enough damage to bypass the were-vulture's resistance, just kind of hid behind a pillar and watched. But the rogue, unknown to the rest of the party, had pilfered a silver dagger off of one of the corpses of an enemy they fought earlier. Perhaps a lieutenant with an insurance policy. Not being able to reach the were-vulture in close combat, they threw the dagger and missed. The were-vulture's skin was just too hard, and it wasn't a clean shot. And so the dagger fell into the space below the were-vulture. Now it was the monk's turn. Tyru Synoske sat for a moment and thought, what could I do here? But he quickly came up with a plan. Now see, the thing is, Tyru Synoske had claimed a magic item earlier on in this adventure. If you know what slippers of spider climbing do, it's a similar concept. It was a little custom-made item I had that let him run along a wall or up a wall equal to a distance of whatever their actual speed is. Essentially, they could travel on walls during their turn, but he could not actually stop there. He couldn't cling to the wall. However, being a monk with an exceptionally high speed, he had an idea. He began to run at top speed until he got close to the pillar and then jumped as high as he could towards the pillar. He rolled fairly high and landed about 10 feet up the pillar, but continued to run upwards using his boots. After he got another 20 feet up the pillar, he then decided he was going to do a backflip. Everyone kind of laughed, but this was the kind of thing that player liked to do, throw a little bit of extra acrobatics and fun into their character. But then he proceeded to roll a 20. And so he described how he kicked off of the pillar, backflipped towards the were-vulture, and attempted to grapple. Now, grappling in D&D 3.5 was a bit complicated, but to simplify it, first he had to make an attack roll, but this was essentially just to touch the were-vulture, to make sure that he came into contact. And again, he rolled fairly high, so easily made contact. But the next part is more difficult. You need to maintain the grapple. You need to struggle against the were-vulture. Now, the were-vulture rolled quite high, and I was doing all this in public to make sure everyone kind of had an extra sense of anticipation. But then, when Tyru Synoske decided to roll, he rolled, again, you guessed it, a 20. He definitely succeeded. He now was grappled onto this were-vulture who was frantically trying to fly away. Now the rest of the party just watched in shock as this all happened, and the were-vulture proceeded to try to escape the grapple, or More specifically to try to move. But the thing is, when you're grappled, you can't move. Not unless you can beat the other person's grapple check. And though they tried, they failed. The other players held their actions, and when it came to Tyru Synoske, he had a smirk on his face. I'm gonna pin them. Everyone at the table was shocked and confused. Quite literally for a few of them, because as I said, grappling's complicated, so they're like, well, what's that gonna do? Well, the thing is, when you pin a flying character, you're essentially pinning their wings. Can't really fly without those. And what was directly below the were-vulture? Yes, that's right. A silver dagger. So quickly I ask, are you... And he cuts me off. Yes, I'm pile driving the were-vulture into the dagger. We all laugh, and of course, I'm very amused, so I say, alright, we'll count this grapple check as an attack roll then. I still let the were-vulture roll against it, just to see if they could escape. And again, the were-vulture rolled fairly high. I believe it was a 16. But Tyru rolled himself a 20 again. There were shouts of excitement as Tyru took the were-vulture, crumpled their wings, and slammed them down directly onto the silver dagger. Now the thing is, when you fall, you take falling damage, and it's a d6 for every 10 feet you fall, so that's 30 feet down. And on top of that, the silver dagger does a 1d4. So in the spirit of awesomeness, I said, okay, I said this was an attack roll, and it's technically a crit, so go ahead, you can roll double the damage that you should be dealing. So that's 66 and 2d4. But I said, that's so crazy though, you're not going to get away with this scot-free. You're taking half the damage that the were-vulture does. I gave him the dice, and he proceeded to roll. Needless to say, it was easily enough damage to take down the frail were-vulture, and I allowed it all to bypass the resistance because of the silver dagger it was being driven down into. And while taking half of the falling damage, just the d6s, not the d4s, Tyru was beaten up a little bit, but he was still doing alright. But he was the closest to the body, being directly on top of it, and decided he'd get first chance at looting it. First thing he looked at was the scepter, and he grabbed it. Now, if something secretive happens, I like to pass notes, and so I passed Tyru a note that said something along the lines of, you feel the scepter trying to influence you in a negative way, something along that line. Suddenly, his face just kind of distorts in like a menacing look, and then he proceeds to attack one of the other players. Run straight at them, give him a good punch. Of course, no one really understands what's going on, but they start to fight back. And eventually, they're able to knock him unconscious. Not before he messes them up pretty bad, though. Out of character, after this happens, they say, what the heck? Tyru just puts his hand up and says, oh, sorry, Pep made me do it. He told me the scepter, gained control of me. I am so shocked at that point. I am just like, that is not what I said. I showed everyone the note, and the point was that the scepter is basically supposed to slowly turn you to a more chaotic evil alignment. Very slowly. The point is that if you held the scepter for a long time, you would slowly start to have more evil thoughts. But somehow he took that to mean that it was an absolute control of him, and it told him to murder the party. It worries me that his character is that close to tipping that that's all it took. Either way, though, it was a ton of laughs. It was great excitement. The 3 d20s rolled in one session by the same player was just ridiculous. Especially since a lot of his high rolls weren't even necessary. It was jump checks and acrobatics checks to do backflips. Oh my gosh. But when he rolled that final 20 to drive the were-vulture down on the dagger, oh, I was flabbergasted. So was the rest of the party. Now, I wish this story had a happy ending, but on the way out, trying to leave the cave, they came across some more minions, and because they were all in such a weakened state, they really had no choice but to flee. And Tyru, who had just barely gained consciousness and regained a few hit points, decided to stay behind and hold back the minions so the rest of the party could escape. A very noble gesture, I must say. But in reality, it's just because he had a lot of fun with that character, but he wanted to try a new one out. We all kind of just shrugged that off and went on with the rest of the campaign. Anyway, that's the end of the story. If you like this kind of thing, let me know, and maybe I can dig up some more D&D stories from my past. But until the next time, amazing adventures!